we have this substance called water. About 150 years ago, we realized that it was made of components. It's 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Now, what do we do when someone comes into the room saying, well, that's not how I choose to think about water? You know, that's chemistry for me is whatever confirms the book of Genesis. Okay? A person is free to use the word chemistry any way they want, but no one is under any obligation to take them seriously. They're simply not talking about chemistry. And when you have to convince someone that water is really 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, I mean, the most basic factual claim about the nature of matter, all you can do is appeal to values. You have to appeal to scientific values like the value of understanding the world or the value of evidence. If someone doesn't respect evidence, what evidence are you going to give them to prove that they should respect it? If someone doesn't value logical consistency, what logical argument are you going to give them that will demonstrate that they should?
But I didn't just pull the number out of a hat. I mean, there's a group at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that looked at 40 years of parliamentary elections in the Muslim world, literally every election that has occurred, and found that Islamists got 15% of the votes. So I would say that when you take this number 15% who vote for Islamist parties, and then you look at the poll results on specific implementation of Sharia law, so do you want adulterers and thieves given the traditional punishments, or should apostates be killed? You never find the number, with very few exceptions, you never find the number as low as 15% voting in favor of those punishments. It's often 60%, depending on the society. So I believe nudging that up to something around 20% is still a conservative estimate of the percentage of Muslims worldwide who have values relating to human rights and free speech that are really in zero-sum contest with our own. And I just think we have to speak honestly about that.
I should be clear. In criticizing Islam, I'm not criticizing all Muslims. There are Muslims who don't take the doctrine very seriously. There are Muslims who don't read the Quran with any attention.
Same thing in every religion.
Yes, yes. But Islam is at a very different moment in its history. And it's as though we're encountering the Christians of the 14th century, armed with 21st century weapons. We have a real problem with Islam, and it's not an accident that we're not having this conversation about the Amish or Quakers or Jains or even Buddhists. I mean, there are ideas have consequences, and the idea that you can get to paradise by dying in defense of the faith, in fact, dying in defense of the faith is the best thing that can possibly happen to you, that is a mainstream notion in Islam.
Is there any lesson in how...
We have to realize that there is a subset of the Muslim world that takes the idea of conquering the world for Islam very, very seriously. And we deny that at our peril. And it is different than Buddhists who we might mistreat. You know, I mean, the Buddhists are being mistreated by the Chinese in Tibet. Buddhism doesn't have... It's possible to get Buddhist violence, and we had Buddhist violence in World War II. I mean, Zen Buddhism was very flexible in helping to inspire the kamikaze pilots. It was kind of a Zen, Shinto, national war ethic, but it's harder to bend Tibetan Buddhism into a death cult. And we don't have Tibetan Buddhist suicide bombers blowing themselves up on Chinese buses. Wouldn't be impossible, but it's much less likely, and it's less likely because of what they believe. So my argument is that beliefs matter, and let's talk honestly about the logical consequences of beliefs.
We form beliefs about facts, and this constitutes science and history and journalism and every other domain in which we claim to be talking about the way the world is. But we also form beliefs about values, and this captures all of the juicy questions in life, meaning and morality and spiritual experience. But it's always seemed to me that these two operations, why many people think they're quite different, are the same. And so we did some neuroimaging work where we put people in a fMRI scanner, and we gave them statements to read, very simple statements drawn from many different categories. But we were able to separate out mathematics and ethics, which were really our most dissimilar content areas. Mathematics was just equations being judged true or false. And ethics was very value-laden statements like, it's good to be kind to children versus it's good to torture children. So a completely different content, and yet the difference between accepting a proposition as true and rejecting it as false was essentially the same. And so what I would argue to you is that if the brain is doing the same thing when it accepts a proposition versus when it rejects it, regardless of whether it's about Jesus being born of a virgin or about mathematics, we should be hesitant to ascribe radically different categories to that to those operations in our conversation with one another. So whatever the subject under discussion, there are good reasons for believing things and there are bad reasons. And the problem here is that religion has made bad reasoning into an art form. Is it ethical to kill a person for changing his religion? Now, I would bet my life that the answer to that question is no. Which is to say, I would bet my life that killing people for apostasy is a bad strategy for maximizing human well-being. As it turns out, however, if you poll British Muslims, ages 16 to 24, 36% of them disagree with me and think that people should be killed for leaving their faith. These are British Muslims. As it turns out, they're on firm ground, theologically speaking. The Quran does not explicitly say that apostates should be killed, but the Hadith does. The sacred literature of the Hadith does repeatedly and without equivocation. Is this edict ethical? Is it compatible with a civil society? Is the reliance upon authority that has brought this barbarism to us down through the generations even remotely compatible with science? Now, what can we say about this as scientists? I mean, is it too soon to say that killing people for changing their religion is wrong? Is it too soon to say that it's a terrible strategy for maximizing human happiness? I think not. Conceding this is to concede that some belief systems are worse than others by any criteria we value. Some worldviews are lousy, and it is not unscientific to say so. In fact, it is unscientific not to say so.
Thorbrand with explosive. When they were apprehended and imprisoned, they brought war tank and bombarded the place and released them. So if you told me the foreign people are not part of what's happening there, then I mean most people here are intellectual. They know what's going on. So
would you like a response? I get the gist of your question.
Thank you. But the brainwash and the media bias will not continue to fool Americans.
Permit me to respond to your
sensible,
question.
intelligent people here today. They will find the truth.
Do you actually want to? Do you want a response? Okay. Well, first of all, you're wrong about the status of Jesus in Islam. He's certainly respected. He's considered a prophet, but he's not divine, and that's a crucial distinction. And if you really want to push that conversation further, what's the status of Hinduism? I mean, if I were going to grant you that there's no conflict between Islam and Christianity, which is there's no reason to grant, there is clearly a conflict between Islam and Hinduism. I mean, polytheism is perfectly anathematized under Islam, there's no debate there, and there are a billion Hindus who are absolutely wrong and fit only for conversion or the sword. And yes, it is true that our invasion of Iraq pulled the lid of a dictatorship off of these ethnic and religious tensions. But to say that life among Sunni and Shia has for 1,000 years been wonderful is to disregard all of Muslim history. It's just not true. And on a daily, and I wasn't, for the most part, I'm not even talking about Iraq, I was talking about Pakistan. And on a daily basis, Shia mosques and Sufi mosques and Ahmadi mosques in Pakistan are blown up by Sunnis. And it's not the result of Western occupation, because we're not in Pakistan. It's been going on for quite some time, and it's understandable. The problem we have is that someone like Osama bin Laden, while you can say he's distorting the faith of Islam, it's not really obvious how he is distorting it. And you really have to split hairs to see how he's distorting it.